Hello my friends and welcome to today's video. I'm Jeanette with Vivo Vintage Designs. In today's tutorial I am going to be using a combination of acrylic paint and alcohol ink on Cradle board. And if you don't have Cradle board, you can use canvas to do this. I don't know if you can use hot glue on photo paper, but for this tutorial I'm using Cradle board, which is wooden. And I have a few videos on where I adhered alcohol ink paintings and watercolor paintings to Cradle board and then resined over them. I will link those videos in the description box if you're interested in watching the process. But for this particular tutorial, I am going to paint stacked stones on the Cradle board. So I've used my pencil and I've created some organic looking shapes, stone shapes. And now I am going to use some acrylic paint in the color turquoise to paint in those shapes. I have also used blue tape, painter's tape, to tape around the sides of the Cradle board because I want to make sure that I don't get any paint on the sides. And later on I will be using resin to fill in the stone shapes. So I want to make sure that, again, that I keep my sides of the Cradle board clean. So here you see that I have painted the stones with the turquoise acrylic paint. Now I'm going to use a hot glue gun to outline those shapes. And of course, if you've used a glue gun before, you know that it's not very easy to get a nice, smooth, straight line. But because these are stones, I don't mind. Now, if you don't get the glue exactly on the blue outline, it's okay because you can always touch it up with more acrylic paint. Now, once I finish outlining the stones and I make sure that the glue is completely dry, I'm going to use black acrylic paint to do the background. And as I started to paint the background, I thought I wanted it to be perfectly smooth, but then I liked the way the brush strokes looked, so I used a cross-hatching motion to get a little bit of texture in the background. Now, all the products used in this video will be linked in the description box, and if you don't see the description box, look in the box just below the video, and usually on the right-hand corner on the top there is an arrow. If you click on that arrow, it will expand the box. If not, you can click on Show More, which is usually on the bottom left-hand corner of that box, and it will expand. And there you'll find a list of all the products used and links. Now here I am painting the background in black, and I'm using a large brush for the larger areas, and then I also have a smaller brush to get into those tight corners. I don't recommend using ink to paint the background because the wood will absorb the ink and you'll go through a lot of it and it may not come out perfectly smooth. So I do recommend using acrylic paint for this. And the brand that I'm using is Meeden, and it's really nice and thick. If you don't have this, you can use craft paint, craft acrylic paint, but you may have to do a couple of coats in order to cover it well. Now this was inspired by a video that I did a while ago, and it was for stacked stone cards. And I really liked the way that looked, so I wanted to do a painting that I could add some resin to. Now if you're not comfortable using resin, or if you just don't want to, you don't have to, because you'll see that once the painting itself is finished, it is pretty enough on its own. But I wanted the contrast of the very shiny stones against the black background, which is rather matte. Now I will be using alcohol ink within the stones to create a little texture and dimension in the stones. So I have two different turquoise colors that I will be using, and I also have the gold mixative. And once I applied the alcohol ink to it, again, you'll see in just a moment, I used two different shades of turquoise, and it looked a little bit dark to me. So off camera, I came back, and with a sea sponge, I took a little bit of snow cap and I tapped it in over the dark blues and lightened it up a little bit. But then I thought that looked a little boring. So I took the same sea sponge and I added a little bit of gold. I just dabbed it in here and there because just putting the gold on with the paintbrush was a little too harsh for me. I wanted it to be a softer look. And then after I did all of that, I thought the stones still looked too plain. So I did go back in with the glue gun and I added a few lines within the stones, and you'll see that in just a moment. So here I'm applying the alcohol ink, and I'm making sure that I get it all the way up to the glue. And even if I get it on the glue, it's okay because I'm going to be using a liquid chrome gold pen to go over the glue. So you can see here that I'm adding a second shade of turquoise, which was a mistake because it was kind of dark. And you can see that adding the gold with the brush makes it look very harsh. So I did go over that to try and soften it a little bit. You just want to make sure that you cover the entire area. Go right up to that glue line. And make sure to stick around till the end of the video because I did do a short video of the finished painting, and I'll also provide you with a picture. But I wanted to make sure that I caught the shine from the resin. So stick around till the end of the video if you'd like to see the finished painting. And I forgot to mention, after you apply the glue, make sure that you go back and remove all those little glue strings. I used an eraser to lift the strings off of the board and then pull them off either with my fingers or cut them off with a sharp razor. So now I've finished applying the alcohol ink. And again, I thought it looked a little bit too dark. So as I mentioned before, I did go back with the sea sponge and add a little bit of snow cap. I tapped it in here and there, and because there was blue on the bottom, it did absorb the blue, but it did lighten it a little bit. And again, you'll see that in just a moment. I even tried to do a little misting with alcohol to try and get a pebbly look. But because the alcohol ink was absorbed, it really didn't work very well. It worked a little bit, but not as much as when I use it on photo paper. I even tried the larger spray bottle, but it really didn't do much. It wasn't very noticeable. Now I'm going to use a liquid chrome marker in gold, and I'm going to go over all of that glue. And I'm trying to be careful not to get it on the blue or the black, But even if you do, it's okay. You can just go over it with the black acrylic paint. And if you get it on the blue, it's okay because we've already added gold to the stones, so it'll just blend right in. Now I'm using the marker that I'm using now has a medium nib, and the pack that I bought has 3 different sizes, which is really nice. So to start with, I used the medium nib, and then I did go back in with the smaller nib to make sure that I covered as much of that glue, especially around the sides, as I possibly could. So just take your time and try and get it done as well as you can. And if you don't have the liquid chrome markers, you can use the metallic Posca pens if you have them. Now here you see I've switched to the smaller nib, and I'm tilting the cradle board so that I can be sure to get those edges of the glue as well as I can. So here all the glue is painted with the liquid chrome markers, and I'm liking the way this looks, but again I thought it was too dark, so off camera I did use the sea sponge and the snow cap, and I also added a little bit of glue. And you can see that I thought the stones looked too plain, so I went back with the glue gun and I added a few lines because I wanted to create a little bit more interest. And then I used the liquid chrome gold marker to go over those lines, and I really liked the way it looked. And you can see the snow cap did lighten this color a little bit, and I added again a little bit of extra gold in there as well. And I really like the way this was looking, but if I did it again, I think I would use lighter colors. Now I'm going to use resin to put inside each of the stones. So I had to tape the bottom because I didn't create an edge for the bottom stone. So I used a little blue tape to create a border so that my resin would not leak over onto the sides. Now the resin I'm using is art resin, which is my favorite. But of course you can use any resin you like. And if you don't want to use resin, this painting looks pretty just as it is. But I thought it would look really interesting to have the contrast of the matte black background and then the shininess of the resin. So when you use art resin, you mix equal parts. You make sure you mix it very, very well. If you don't mix it well and if you don't use equal parts, the resin will not solidify, and you'll have wet spots and your painting may be ruined. So if I had let this resin sit for a little bit, I would not have had as many bubbles, but I am very impatient and I don't always have as much time as I would like to do my art. So here you can see I'm using a gloved finger to push that resin right up to that glue. I want to make sure that I cover the entire stone. And when you're using resin, it's smart to use gloves because it is really sticky. However, if you do get it on your hands or on your desk, you can use baby wipes to clean it up. That really cleans it well. So take your time if you decide to use the resin to get it right up to the edge of that glue. And if you decide that you don't want to resin this and you want to keep it just the way it is, you can seal the entire cradle board with the varnish and the UV protection, or your canvas, whatever you decide to use. Now, I chose not to seal the alcohol portion of this painting with the KAMAR varnish or the UV protection, which may not have been a wise thing to do, but I decided I would take my chances. So now that I've applied the resin, I'm using my torch to go over the areas that I have resined and make sure that I remove those bubbles. And you can use a toothpick. If you have any bubbles that are being resistant, you can just use a toothpick or a pointy object to pop them. And then you want to cover this and let it sit overnight until the resin cures completely. Well, we're almost at the end. I hope that you enjoyed this. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Bye.